breathe. We're going to create thousands of new jobs, and we're going to reduce our carbon emissions. And we want to have carbon free by 2045. That is now law of the state of Washington. I point out those two dates because they both are very realistic. They're very achievable, even using existing technology. Now, we know the technology is going to get better. We know that the price of solar is going to continue to go down. But even using existing technology, these are very capable, we're very capable of achieving these ends. So we wouldn't take that jump if we didn't think it was very achievable, and we believe that it is in the state of Washington. But it takes legislation because, as Bill has talked about, this game is so rigged against clean air because we still have this giant subsidy going to the coal and oil-based generation of electricity. And until we remove those subsidies, the best measure is an absolute mandate that our utilities give us clean energy and get off of fossil fuels. So we have done that, and we have done that with a high degree of confidence. And what gives us confidence on this is that the rate of reduction of cost has been so dramatic. The price of installed solar has come down 80% just in the last few years. And there's no reason why, the curve may flatten a little bit, but there's no reason to believe that that is not going to continue in the right direction. So you bet this can be done.
Let me pick up on that, Jay, with another question. And that question is, how much money would it take for all Americans to have low-cost renewable energy as a primary source? And let me go beyond that. You know and I know that, depending on where you live, if you put solar panels on your house, it requires an initial down payment, but the payback, depending on where you live, is 7, 8, 9 years. And then maybe for the next 10 or 15 years, you literally have free electricity. So that is a good investment. But the impediment right now is that a lot of working class and lower income families cannot afford the initial down payment. So they end up paying more for electricity than somebody who can invest in solar. Now, if you had a sane government that wanted to protect working families and lower their electric bills, not to mention cut carbon emissions, we would be investing heavily in solar. But Bill, tell me, give me some ideas now. If we want to have millions and millions of homes throughout this country have solar, what does it take to do?
So Bernie, you've gotten to see this firsthand. You've gone down Route 7 and seen those homes, say in Rutland, where they, low income homes where they not only put some solar up, they did the other work that we have to do, which is things like insulate the hell out of homes, right. Go to air source heat pumps instead of oil or gas burner in the basement, that kind of stuff. All that stuff, as you point out, pays back. It pays back beginning month one, because your bill, you're no longer paying an oil bill or a gas bill. The only problem is figuring out the financing, and that's what governments are there for, to allow us to make smart investments that pay off quickly over time.
And well, so just picking up on that, I can remember like it was yesterday, but it was like 20 years ago. We got some money. We got a lot of money in the state of Vermont for sustainable energy, for energy efficiency. Went to a house that two older women in Barre, Vermont, central Vermont, were living. We retrofitted their old home. Their electric bill went down by 50%. Point being, if we help people make their homes energy efficient, we provide solar, people will save money on their electric bills. If you don't believe in climate change, you don't care about the environment, fine. We will save you substantial sums of money through sustainable energy.
Vermont's, you know that that's true because when you drive around Vermont in the winter, you watch, and it's the poorest houses in the state are the ones where there's heat rippling out from every wall, where people are essentially paying to heat the outdoors, and it's disgusting for for them to have to pay that money, people who could put that money to good use. And instead, they're handing it over to the utilities and to the oil companies. And it really is time to end that, even if there wasn't a climate crisis that threatened the planet. It's ridiculous to have people having to pay money for something that doesn't do any good.
Right. All right. Let me go to a question. I'm mispronouncing a name, no doubt. Kaina M. Ciccone. And she writes, are there ways to start change very locally? All right. What can people do at the local level? They're not in the Senate. They're not in the Congress. They're not a governor. What can they do locally? Varshini, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say first and foremost, you should join a movement, join an organization. One of the best ways to get involved right now is to join. It could be Sunrise, it could be 350.org, it could be whatever climate organization is around you. And see, the way that we have structured our movement is that any person anywhere can be a part of our organization, can start a chapter, can participate in our activities, whether that means electing a congressperson that's a Green New Deal champion, whether it means pushing for state-based legislation, whether it means working on the presidential campaign so we can stop Donald Trump. This is an opportunity for us to make a national movement local and have these local victories and chapters across the country feeding into a national movement.
Let me throw out another idea, which has not come up, but I think we've had some real success, and that is the issue of divestment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who wants to say a word on
Close
the
to my heart.
of divestment and some of the victories that have been won there?
I want to boast on Varshini for a minute. Varshini got the University of Massachusetts to divest from fossil fuel. This has become the largest anti-corporate campaign in history. As of today, we're at $14 trillion worth of endowments and portfolios that have divested from fossil fuel. The University of California system divested last year. Oxford University, the most prestigious university in the world, divested 2 weeks ago. They've been joined by, the New York City Pension Fund, all the public accounts of the country of Ireland. You could list this for all day and all night. And the result has been that we've seen the financial community's understanding of the fossil fuel industry change dramatically. These guys no longer want to keep pouring money into this industry because they know it's on the way out. You ever see that guy, Jim Cramer, who comes on CNBC and yells at you about which stock to pick and stuff? Well, he said this winter, there's no money to be made in fossil fuels anymore because the divestment movement has taken too many funds out of this game. People won't invest in it. So get the hell out of big oil. There's no money there. And he's right. This has been the worst performing part of the economy. That's why they have no option now but to turn to Congress to try and give them money, because Wall Street's gotten kind of sick of it. They're sick of losing money on them. The only people really who want to keep losing money on these guys are the Republican Party. And unfortunately, at the moment, they're in the position to fork over hundreds of billions of dollars. That's one of the reasons we've got to keep that from happening anymore.
All right. One of the areas, David mentioned it early on, but we haven't spent much time on it. It is enormously important, and that's agriculture. What David said earlier, and I think everybody agrees, in the Midwest, throughout the world, farmers are going to see diminished crops as the climate warms, as they deal with drought, as they deal with floods, and that's a real threat to the production of food throughout the world. And Marilyn Chiarello writes, the climate change crisis presents an opportunity to transform our food system. How can we shift from factory farming to local regenerative farming food systems? Who wants to take a shot at that? Local agriculture.
I guess I'll start. The risks to agriculture are enormous, and they're among the scariest threats that come our way. It's estimated that by the end of the century, if we don't change course, we could be dealing with grain yields that are only half as bountiful as they are today. We'd be using them to try and feed maybe 50% more people on the planet. And there's been a lot of research recently showing that climate change will also raise the risk of what's called multiple breadbasket failure. So it won't just be the American Midwest or the Mediterranean or the breadbaskets of China that are failing. It'll be all three of them at once, which will push an incredible pressure on the diet needs of the planet. We already know many people in the present day are suffering from inadequate food. But we also know that we have a lot of solutions here. Regenerative agriculture is a really powerful tool, not just in making crops grow better and more bountifully, but also actually because it allows us to store carbon much more efficiently. We know that by using traditional pasturing practices, we can turn cattle farms, which have been thought of as a carbon problem, into what are called carbon sinks that absorb carbon. It's also true that we may have some technological innovations that will allow us to produce more food through the engineering of crops. But to this point, scientists have tried that for decades. And because most of the scientists doing that work are working at the same companies that are producing pesticides, mostly they've invested their time in making their crops more resistant to pesticides, not more resilient in the face of heat or drought or famine. So we need to do a lot more R&D at the tech level, but we also have to embrace, through policy and through consumption choices, we need to embrace more traditional modes of agriculture wherever we can, especially in places like the U.S. That is, for all of its deep problems, poised to do that already culturally, I think.
Anybody want to say a word?
Yeah, I want to add something that David alluded to, and that is that we have a vision where agriculture can be a service provider of sequestering carbon dioxide in the soil and in our tree fiber and in our carbon pricing systems, which will level the playing field so we won't be having such a subsidy to the fossil fuel industry. The elegant solution is to have essentially those funds used to essentially pay the farmer or the tree crop grower to sequester carbon in the soil and in the trees so they get out of the atmosphere. That gives a stream of revenue to the agricultural industry that can really inspire them not only to keep healthy financially, but to get carbon out of the atmosphere. We think this has real promise. We started this action. It also, frankly, is good politics too, because it gets the agricultural industry to understand there's a dual benefit for dealing with climate change. Not only can you prevent climate from destroying the system upon which our whole ag system is dependent on, but you actually get a stream of revenue. So now you've got a new way. You rent your acre for a wind turbine, you get paid there. Then you get paid from the pricing system that pays you to do the cropping systems that keeps carbon in your soil. I think this has great promise.
All right, let me wrap it up. Just ask each of you to make a very, very brief closing statement. Maybe start off within the narrative why I am optimistic that, in fact, we can take on the fossil fuel industry, that we can transform our energy system, and we can save the planet for our kids and our grandchildren. David?
Well, I always like to say that optimism is a matter of perspective. So while it's hopeless, I think, to try to preserve the planet's climate as we've known it, all of the signs are pointing in the right direction. Political movement, public opinion, even business interests are moving in the right direction. They're not nearly where we want them to be, but they're showing much more concern and fear than they did a few years ago. We need that to accelerate. And one of the great gifts of movements like Sunrise is that it shows us that things that once were considered impossible to put into practice, within a few years' time can become conventional wisdom. And we need even more of that going forward. I think we're moving in the right direction. The question is whether we can accelerate things at the speed that we really need them to go.
Good. Bill?
That's right. It's a question of pace. A year ago, a bunch of us in different groups put together this thing called Stop the Money Pipeline to try and pressure the pillars of global capital, the big banks, the insurance companies, the asset managers. In a year, that landscape has changed a lot. The CEO of BlackRock, which is the biggest box of money on planet Earth, said in January that they were going to have to take climate change into account when they made every decision going forward. if they live up to that in any significant way, then we're going to see unrelenting pressure. Now, the question is always, can we make it happen fast enough? So I started by saying physical reality matters. Let's remember what the scientists have told us. We have, according to the IPCC, until 2030 to make fundamental transformations in our energy system, which they described as cutting emissions in half if we want to have any hope of the kind of future that David described, a future where we're able to limit the temperature increase to the targets we set in Paris. That's a decade. That means we have to do everything we can for this decade because it's the last time we're going to have that kind of leverage. And that's why it's incredibly powerful to see people like Varshini and her crew rising up. We need, the only thing I'm going to say about the power of young people, about the 10,000 Greta Thunbergs there are around the world who are leading this fight, about Sunrise Movement. The only thing I'm going to say about that is, it's not okay to take the biggest problem that the planet ever faced and offload it onto the shoulders of high school sophomores, okay? So it's very good that they're leading us, but it's time for everybody else to stand the hell up and get working on this. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, and one of the things that pandemic has shown is that, yeah, there's some knuckleheads out there, but mostly people can come together and work together and make big changes when they have to. We're going to need that kind of affection for each other going forward because it's going to be a really, really dynamic and important decade ahead.
Thanks, Bill. Varshini?
Wow, thank you so much for all the kind words and for the call to action. Yes, we cannot save you, but we do want you to join our movement. Look, there is absolutely no way to feel hopeless when your phone banking captain in Kentucky is a 14-year-old. There is no way to feel hopeless when the person running your call technology for electoral efforts is 12. There is no way to feel hopeless when your volunteer leaders are jumping into action in Birmingham in the midst of Corona to take care of their communities, in Birmingham, Alabama, to take care of their communities and modeling action that now politicians are following. So there is no way to feel hopelessness when you have community and solidarity and you have a plan and you're taking action. So I just want to say, if you are feeling hopeless or isolated or upset that Bernie had to drop out or scared, join the movement and go to sunrisemovement.org. It's very easy. And we want you to be a part of this movement because we need each other. We need every person that we can get in these trenches. And thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. Jay?
Two things. One, there's so many good things happening in clean energy. There's a lot to celebrate. I co-authored a book in 2012 that basically predicted that we were going to have clean energy things at scale and at cost that work. And about 85% of that book has come true. We got electric cars, we got solar panels, we got wind, we got efficiency. We've got it all coming very, very quickly. So there's so much to celebrate technologically. But second, as to why be positive, Bernie, you're an old basketball player. I remember playing with you in the congressional days. You were really tough. And what we know in a basketball game is, look, if you're going to win, you don't win thinking you're going to lose, right? It makes it more likely you're going to win if you believe you're going to win. So I believe we're going to win this very deeply, and it's going to help us. And thanks a lot, Bernie, and thanks for being with this great group.
All right. Well, I am optimistic because we have great leaders and writers like the ones that we have seen this evening. And I am optimistic because I believe that deep down, people throughout our country, people throughout the world understand and increasingly understand that it is imperative that we act boldly, that we have the courage to take on the greed and corruption of the fossil fuel industry. Because you know what? We want to make sure that our kids and our grandchildren have a planet that is healthy and is habitable. And I think we're seeing that movement throughout our own country, led by the young people in many respects, but also throughout the world. So let me thank all of you for watching our virtual town meeting tonight. And let me thank our panelists for being with us and for the great work that they are all doing. Everybody stay healthy, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Good night.